abstracts that I want to walk you through as applied examples of what an abstract environment might look like. Okay? All right, just give me a sec. I'm not sure whether I'm recording or not. This Teams is being screwy. Just give me a sec. Okay, so that's recording. Okay, that's my backup. All right, so thank you all for coming. For those of you who don't know, my name's Joel Quirk, and I'm one of a team that's been running a project through the politics department and the School of Social Sciences, which we've entitled Everything Everywhere All at Once. And we've been doing this for a while, so I don't anticipate that some of you might have heard of it previously. But if you forgive me a little bit of repetition, our primary kind of motivation for putting this together was a sense that COVID had turned the world completely to shit, which I'm sure no one will argue with. And one of the ways it turned things to shit was that at postgraduate level here at WITS, the universe for students shrunk really significantly. So students were still doing coursework, they were still writing dissertations, but the other sides of becoming a trainee academic, which at postgraduate level, which is what you are, not all that you are, there's other things you can do professionally as well. But we had this sense that that side of things had really fallen away significantly. So Everything Everywhere All at Once was a desire to kind of build back from COVID in a couple of different ways. Firstly, we wanted to provide additional skills and instruction around things that aren't coursework assessments, but are still really crucial for kind of building up your kind of portfolio as a whole. So we've been doing training on how to do field work. We've been doing sessions on how to navigate this bureaucracy, methodologies, strategies for doing dissertations, and a kind of cluster of stuff that is designed to kind of fill out how you navigate the world as a postgraduate student. The second thing we've been doing, and this is hopefully more organic than kind of designed from on high, is we want people who are registered in courses and WITS to talk to each other more. So we really want to kind of build what we kind of call horizontal connections amongst peers, because you guys have much more Um, no, that'll just take me forever. Sorry, guys. So can I just ask, the anthropology connection, I'm talking to the online people, the anthropology connection dropped completely. And what I've done instead is I've now shifted the recording and audio to my laptop. So I'm kind of hoping you can hear me now.
We can hear you loud and clear.
Okay,
Yes,
thanks.
yeah.
I'm just gonna put the gain up kind of fully because I'm gonna want you to talk just briefly if that's okay. And I don't know why the anthropology kind of AV connection has gone. But if I'm honest, I don't have time to fix it. So I'm just gonna go with what we have, and if it's okay, I'm gonna share or hopefully share, but you're just gonna have to be a little bit anonymous, to be honest, which I hope is okay. So can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay, cool. All right, so we'll just have to muddle through if that's okay. So let me collect my thoughts. Yeah, so we're trying to build up cohorts. We're trying to train people with skills and expertise you need to be a researcher and academic. And it's not simply your dissertation. And as part of that, we've been running a project which is called From Abstract to Publication. So this is the second round of the call. We did this initially in September, and we ran a series of workshops, much like the one I'm doing now. And in June, around 20 postgraduate students from WITS presented at the Southern African Historical Association. And the deal was that we paid the registration, we paid for the dinner, and the tariff, the thing that you guys had to do to contribute and participate, was to submit a 5,000 word draft conference paper ahead of the actual conference. Does that make sense? So you submit the paper, we pay your registration. And we're partly doing that for a couple of reasons. One is that you will do a much better job at a conference if you actually have a paper to work off. You know, it's not uncommon for people, particularly senior academics, to show up and just talk randomly. And that is a far less useful professional experience than actually having a written paper. And then secondly, and I think more consequentially long term, we want to use the process of preparing an abstract, drafting a paper, presenting at a conference as a foundation for at least some of you. I'll caveat this will not be everyone. And we're happy for have people to go to the conference bit and then go, that's it for now. But at least some of you, we want to take those papers and the feedback you get from the conference as a foundation for preparing something for publication. So that's what we're kind of doing now. I didn't do this to be performative. I just kind of was in and needed the printer, but we have a whole bunch of papers from people who submitted at the Southern African Historical Association, which my colleagues are now reviewing to provide input into. And eventually we will be assigning people mentors, individual academics, who will walk you through the submission of a paper for publication. Okay, so that's the trajectory and that's the sequence. What we're doing, what we're doing mostly today is just talking about the very first stage. How do we do an abstract? And then crucially, because I'm imagining that the vast majority of you are writing dissertations of some kind, I want to talk you through the logistics and conceptual shifts you have to make in order to take something that is a dissertation, which has its own logics and formats and protocols and scripts, and reconvert that into something that you can use for a conference presentation and eventual publication, which has its own different and distinct logics and scripts. Okay, so that's what I want to do in the presentation today. Before I jump too far into that, can I just briefly ask you, and you're veterans of this process, so I'm assuming you'll be quite quick at it, if we could just go around the room and say something about yourself and what you're studying and the kinds of things that you're looking to develop for a conference presentation. Anyone who wants to start can start. If the people are online who want to go, that is also good. But everyone at least has to say who you are. That's okay.
Okay, I'll start.
Here we go, online.
Yeah.
Is it easier to just be anonymous?
It's fine. I can say my name. It's okay.
Okay, can I just, everyone can hear? Yeah, this is as far up as I can put the volume.
Okay, can I go now? Sure.
Please.
Yes, my name is Tholakele Zulu. Currently, I'm not working. I'm busy preparing for my application for the PhD. I haven't done any studying for the past 4 years due to COVID. I got really sick, almost died. So now I'm trying to get back to my feet, and I saw this as an opportunity for me to start as I'm going through the journey of my PhD. Thank you.
Cool. Since we started online, can I just ask the other online people to come in?
If no one else wants to go, I'll go ahead.
Please.
I'm Bradley Former. I am a Masters of Education student, specifically focusing on queer critical literacies and their impact in basically creating social justice education. Basically came here just to sort of understand like how to submit an abstract, sort of begin that process, maybe not go further ahead just yet, but see what happens.
Okay, cool. Other online people? Are we being very shy?
Hi.
George?
Yes. My name is George Mukwa. I'm also currently doing my master's in education. I'm focusing on the inclusive education, but particularly the role of leadership in ensuring that inclusive education actually is implemented in the classroom and not just a government policy or not just a government policy, but what are their experiences, particularly against the background of COVID-19, and yeah, that's what I'm doing actually.
Thanks. Does anyone else want to come in here?
Oh, yes. Hi everyone. My name is Mhlanga Zimbala, and I'm also in the process of starting to do my PhD in slavery and bondage. So I'm in that process. I just in the middle of an MA, but I'm hoping soon to be starting a PhD.
Okay. There's quite a few of you online. I'm just kind of wondering if you're feeling uncomfortable about it. With your permission, I might actually just shift to the people who are here in person. Okay. All right. So if you don't mind, at the very least, can I ask you to just put your email addresses in the chat so we have a way of following up and communicating with you? Okay. People in person. Anyone want to share? Yep.
To me, and yeah, I was all for it. Just start going on to start my PhD in January. My interests are township economy, township in the formal and informal governance.
I'll go.
Are we just tired today? Is that it? Are you sitting there going, I ain't got no time for these introductions? Can you just kind of...
Studies.
Yeah.
For Masters in Education, I was looking at, rethinking the economics curriculum, right? And I wanted to center Black economics teachers here, and I was asking them what would they want, what content and knowledge would they want their learners to be exposed to promote, economic transformation. And then now for my current masters, I'm looking at whether or not first-year learners who completed high school economics, whether or not they have higher financial literacy compared to learners who didn't.
Okay, cool.
You can go. The psychology department. I'm writing up my PhD. At the moment, maybe not what I imagined it was going to be. Started it, but basically, I run a community project in Dobsonville because it's like a social justice initiative with young people, and so my study is really on the emotional interactions of people involved, all the like stakeholders involved in taxes in so yeah, and I think I was just fascinated even just about the links to anthropology because I've done narrative interviews, but I've also done ethnographic observations of our interactions when we meet. So I'm really trying to think of how
That sounds for logical goals. Welcome.
Hey everyone, I feel kind of intimidated since everyone's doing their PhD. I'm still new to this. I'm just doing my honors, I'm doing a double adjoint honors program in politics and development studies. My current research is basically elections. Well, I'm interested in electoral politics in Africa, but currently I'm specifically focusing on the significance of party manifestos in South Africa, like the recent general election. So I'm just looking at how manifestos played a role. Yeah. And Joel told me about this conference.
Yes.
So I really just want to find out what it's about.
I'm Fisher Mazibu. I too was literally thinking about how it feels a bit intimidating to be in a room full of PhD students. But that's besides the point. I am also doing my joint honors in politics and development studies. My current research is interested in colonialism, coloniality, post-colonialism, just simply what I think what it means, what African subjectivity means through the lens of colonialism, and looking at indigeneity and what how colonialism impacted indigenous spiritual systems and indigenous socio-cultural life in general.
I think I'll go off I too was intimidated, but okay. As I'm doing my honors politics, and my research is focused on colored identity and the emerging behaviors in the Western Cape.
So yeah, so I probably should kind of say something a little bit here. I specifically invited some honors students to participate in this program. And I felt a little uncomfortable doing it because I do want this to be an open call where opportunities are available to everyone with applications making. But I made a decision that on this occasion that this conference was a specific fit, as we're going to go on to talk about. Different conferences have different professional norms and expectations. And on this occasion, and I'll talk about this a little bit more in detail, an anthropological conference is a conference that puts a premium upon ethnographic research. So you can't be highly abstract. You can't engage in first principles theory. You have to have gone out in the world and talked to someone and found out something about them. And it's on this basis that I feel comfortable inviting some students to participate, because you're all doing ethnographic research. And as a consequence, I feel like it's worthwhile having this conversation. And the evidence you have, one of the things you'll learn as a student is that your evidence is the most important commodity you carry with you. So if you've done field work, you've done archives, you've done research, you've talked to people in the world, and you've found out things that aren't otherwise easily accessible, that information is valuable. It's valuable to you because you give a shit about your projects, but it also means that you can speak to an audience and basically go, look at what I found. And in anthropology, the look at what I found is look at what I found when I talk to people. Look at what I found when I went out and did participant observations and ethnographies and so on and so forth. So that is one of the reasons why I think this is worthwhile. Can I just ask, does anyone else want to share? Because I felt like I put you on the spot. If I'm going to make it optional and not compulsory at this point, if you would like to share, I'd like to hear from you. Okay. Yes, everyone nodded vigorously. It's always validating when you get some vigorous head nodding. Does anyone else want to share?
Hi everyone, my name is Anisi Megani. I am my master's also in the sociology department. My interest are crime, youth, development. So my research is here in male drug abuse in townships. So just coming here, I think I needed something just to help me because I'm struggling with my project. Not struggling with myself, I'm like, I need to put myself on the bed as well. Yeah.
Okay. That's good. Is there anyone else? Yeah, please. Mhm.
Currently, my research paper is on the relationship between governance index, body image, and race control behavior. I don't know if you can hear me. Yeah, that's me.
Okay. I do this for a couple of reasons, and I don't do it because I'm quite kind of sadomasochistic. I think it's always nice to learn more about people's stuff, but also I think you can kind of get a sense of the range of options and topics that kind of exist in this world, and people you can often get project envy. Where you kind of go like, your project sounds so much better than my project. I think that's fine. I'm not telling you to kind of consider your careers, but I think one of the things that this process reveals is that there's a huge amount of really interesting questions and projects in the world. And crucially, and this is kind of the more specific intervention I want to make, what might work for some of you isn't necessarily going to work for others of you, if that makes sense. So one of the issues you have as postgraduate students is you often get advice that pulls you in different directions and invites you to be different types of scholars and processes. And I think one of the challenges you have to face is working out when to kind of say no when someone suggests that you might want to consider it this way or some other way. You've got to be able to go, this is what I do. This is what I do now. You also need to kind of go, I cannot cram a 20-year career into the next 6 months. So you have to be able to go, that's very interesting and valuable, but that's not for now, or that's not for me, and so on. So there's a kind of caveat or asterisk here in terms of how I'm setting this up, where I've done a lot of these types of events. I've organized, I don't know, maybe 15 conferences in my life at various points in time. And I have a sense about what these kind of professional norms look like. But you have to keep in mind that my disciplinary background and point of departure for this is as someone who is primarily trained in politics and international relations, but who also works in kind of law and sociology and anthropology. So some things that I'm saying will be coming from that kind of professional background, and you will need to kind of work and develop how and to what extent they might apply to your circumstances. I'm pretty confident that what I'm saying generally holds across disciplines. But there are certain disciplinary distinctions that always need to be keeping in mind. So, for example, if you work in clinical psychology has quite specific professional norms that look different to how I'm going to talk about things in this context. Okay? So, with that caveat aside, I want to walk you through in a bit of detail how to think about preparing an abstract. I've already given you a bit of sense about what the broader trajectory of the larger project is, but let me just briefly recap so you have a sense of it. We have a workshop on how to write an abstract. That's today. In about 2 weeks, sorry, if you're online, can I get you to mute? Okay. In about 2 weeks, you need to submit that abstract. Okay. So that's the next immediate phase. I'll give you advice and instruction regarding how that might look. And then you decide whether or not you want to submit. And if you submit, we then go further down that road. So in terms of further down that road, there will be a workshop on how to prepare and organize a conference paper. There will then be a deadline when you submit your paper, at which point we pay your registration. And we then do another workshop on how to turn your paper into a presentation ahead of the conference. Make sense? Now, I need to caveat this again by saying that I cannot guarantee you get accepted at the conference. So what I've done is I've talked to the conference organizers of Anthropology Southern Africa. They've said, please make a bulk VIT submission. So what me and my colleagues, Nicole and Ahmed, are going to do is we're going to organize you thematically into panels. We're going to send that group submission to the conference organizers, and we're going to hope that everyone gets up, but we cannot guarantee that everyone gets up. And I have to stress this because when we did this with the history conference, not everyone who we submitted got up. So we were basically told, we want to help you, but we're historians. You need to have some kind of historical dimension to your work. And some of the people who we put up for submission at the conference were not accepted by the organizers. And that, and I'll get to this in a little bit, is not a sign that the quality of the work was necessarily inferior or problematic. Whenever you submit for a conference, you can get wiped on thematic fit and thematic fit alone. And this also applies to journals. You can submit a paper to a journal and the editors will write back going, looks like a great paper, but it's not a paper for this journal. So you kind of need to work out what your lane is. Who am I as an academic? Who are my people? And how might I find a way to sell? And selling is a slightly shitty term, but there is an element of selling. Sell what I do in a format and language which speaks to the things that the conference organizers care about. So they're not doing it to be assholes. I can be very confident about this. There are assholes within the academy, but a lot of the time you end up being bounced and it has nothing to do with you as a person and everything to do with your fit for what this thing is and does. And if you're too far away from what this thing is and does, they will be likely to say thanks, but no thanks. And it's super hard to hear this. You are inclined to take it as a personal failing. And I can reassure you very strongly and categorically that it isn't. A huge amount of the time, it's just that different places do things in different ways. And if you don't quite fit, they won't quite know what to do with you. And the expectation here, and I'll walk you through this, and I've already said, is that anthropologists like ethnographic material. So they're interested in surveys, interviews, participant observations, analysis of songs, prose, physical artifacts, and human environments and human activities. Does that make sense? So in seeking to put a paper together for this specific conference, this is the frame of mind that you need to start with, because you need to meet them where they are, because they have the capacity to accept or reject you on the program. Make sense? Now, what that means, and this can get a bit stupidly performative, you can go, this paper builds upon 6 months of field work in. This paper builds upon X numbers of interviews with. So when you're putting a paper together for an anthropological conference, they don't really care so much about which theorists you're using, although that is relevant. They're interested in knowing what your field work is and what issues might be learned from the stuff you've done out in the world. Does that make sense? So that is part of what you pitch for an abstract and an anthropological conference. When you pitch to a history conference, you pitch your archival knowledge, you pitch your understanding of the past and its relationship to the present. If you go to a law conference, you're like, haha, I read some treaties, I observed a case, so on and so forth. So there's different professional norms, and you pitch and orient your potential contribution in an awareness of what those norms are. Now, disciplinary boundaries are not strong. No one is going to give a shit if you're in education or you're in politics or you're in philosophy and you want to go to an anthropology conference. And this is particularly true in South Africa. Disciplinary boundaries are very, very weak in South Africa. If you want to do sociology, you can show up. No one is going to ask whether you're actually a sociologist. So you can submit and not expect your disciplinary background to be a problem in the consideration of your submission. But they will ask, and I talked to Helen McDonald, the prof at UCT, who's the primary organizer. We talked on the phone, and she says, we want to take everyone, but you have to have some kind of evidence that you didn't get from books. That makes sense? If you have evidence you didn't get from books, she's going to try and take you. And I'm going to try and find a way for you to be included. But if you're doing heavy theory, there's a decent chance that you're not necessarily going to be accepted for this particular event. Okay? Any questions on that? I need to emphasize it really isn't personal, but it can feel personal. No, I'll get to that. I'll get to it now. I will literally start. We were going to do this. I very, very strongly encourage you to consider this as an opportunity to rework and develop shit you have already done or shit you are in the process of doing. And under no circumstances would I suggest that you start a new separate and distinct project for this exercise. Okay? Now, that's not always the case. Sometimes with an abstract, particularly when the conference call is a long way away, you kind of go, the call closes in like January and the conference is until December. You kind of submit an abstract as a way of forcing you to do some damn work between like January and December. But it's a terrible, terrible idea. And a lot of the time you get to September and you're like, shit, I haven't done any work on this. For your purposes, given that I'd imagine all of you already stressed with all the things you're doing for your coursework, it's a very, very bad idea to set up a separate and distinct side project that has you doing different and additional work. So when I talk about making a submission to an anthropology conference, I would like you to think primarily about how you can reconfigure and repurpose material that you have through your dissertation or material that you have to collect in the process of writing your dissertation. Does that make sense? So what this is supposed to do is to have you spin what you're already doing and take it from its dissertation format and put it in a format that is useful for presentation, paper, and publication. Now, there's a couple of different configurations around this. Firstly, it depends what kind of dissertation you're doing. If you're doing a PhD dissertation, which is roughly 90,000 words, you're looking at something that for the conference presentation should be 5, but for the article version can only really be 8 or 9. Okay, so most journals, and this is getting ahead of the game, but just to give you a benchmark, most journals will not take anything above 10, and a lot of them will be at 7 to 9,000. And crucially, so you can't say I didn't tell you, that includes footnotes. So it's a smaller piece of work than you really think it is. So for those of you at PhD level, there's two ways of setting this up. One is that you take a chapter of your dissertation. Now, this should primarily be an empirical chapter of your dissertation. For an anthropology conference, it's like, look, I talked to people, this is what they said. And you repurpose it with what we call a new top and tail. So you're taking a chapter, you're probably still shrinking it because a dissertation chapter is more likely to be 12,000 plus footnotes. So a dissertation chapter is still going to be too long for a conference paper. You shrink it down to maybe 6,000 words of empirics. You give a new top, you give a new tail, and you cut away the scaffolding that makes it a dissertation chapter. You can't go in an article, as I say in my other chapter. It has to stand alone. And that probably means bringing in some of the framing from the larger dissertation into the article, because otherwise you're going to have assumed knowledge issues, where stuff you say in chapter 2 needs to be brought into chapter 4 in order to make chapter 4 a standalone article. Does that make sense? So for PhD level, that's what you're doing. You're slicing off a part of the whole, and you are repurposing it so it stands alone rather than as part of a whole. Make sense? Now, for master's dissertations, which are 20 to 25,000 words, you are cutting radically back on your literature review and scene setting because it takes too long. You are dropping all your research questions and front-end setup because journal articles do not have study objectives and research questions. You still talk about what you're trying to do in the article, but you don't have that dot point list where you go, I'm doing this, I'm doing this, I'm doing this. So for a master's, you're shrinking the front end. You're getting to the point a lot faster. And even then, you are selecting some of your empirics and not all of your empirics. Does that make sense? For you guys doing honors dissertation is 10 to 15,000 words. You are basically doing the same. You're condensing the front end. You're getting to your empirics faster, but you can probably just include all your empirics because you've got a smaller word count. Okay, so different places, different purposes. But the key general point of this is that a paper is going to do less than you think it can do. It's going to be smaller and more purposive and directed and focused in its genesis and orientation than the larger dissertation projects you're all engaged in. Does that make sense? So what you're doing is you're shrinking, you're focusing, and crucially, you're throwing stuff out. You cannot put your arms around the whole world. And one of the things that people make as a mistake is they try and include too much in a paper. You remember when you started your dissertations and you're like, I'm going to do everything. And then you had that sad realization as you went along that you had to kind of shrink in terms of what you can do. And then you push stuff away. A paper and an article is also about pushing stuff away. It's about going, I'm doing this for now, and I'm leaving stuff for later. So we are reconfiguring stuff you already have. Any questions there? And sorry, if you're online, please come in as well.
Yes, so since we're molding our papers according to the norms and standards within anthropology, there's two questions that I have. One, could you help us understand what is anthropology, right? And then two, from a research design perspective, what are some of the research design decisions and choices that anthropologists make and that feature a lot in anthropology journals?
Okay. I don't want to get to the journals yet. I mostly want to talk about abstracts and papers. But at a very rough cut, for a paper or a journal article, you're roughly looking at 1/3, 2/3. So 1/3 literature and scene setting, 2/3 empirical analysis and case study. That makes sense? So the 1/3 is literally, here's what's been said, here's where I stand, here's what I think about it. And then the second 2/3 is, here's what I found, here's what I argue, here are my cases, and so on. So it doesn't always work like that. You could do a methods paper, which looks very different. You could do a regression paper, looks very different. So not all, you guys have read journal articles, right? They kind of look the same, but they don't always look exactly the same. So that disclaimer I started with, where different places do different ways, applies here. But as a very rough cut, 1/3, 2/3. 1/3, here's the literature, 2/3, here's the shit I found. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So 1/3, 2/3. Okay. I will get to that. The short version is, an abstract is a statement of purpose. It's not a contract.
Okay.
A abstract is not a contract. Ever been to a conference and the person stands up, looks a little bit sheepish, but not really sheepish, and goes, "What I thought I was doing was not what I did." Anyone ever seen that happen? It's exceptionally common. You're allowed to go. The abstract and title I submitted on the program has subsequently changed. Here is my new title. So it's a statement of where you think you're going to be, but it's not a contract in terms of exactly what you're going to do. And part of the reason for that is, despite everyone saying you've got to shrink, you've got to shrink, you've got to shrink, it's exceptionally common for people to submit abstracts that have too much shit in them. And then when you go to write the paper up, you go, I thought I had 3 case studies and it turns out I have 2. Or I thought I was going to look at 4 hospitals and I could only get the field work done on 1. That makes sense? So you're setting it up. You should not set it up where, in a perfect world, I'm going to do 1,000 interviews with every president in Africa since you should not be writing an abstract that has no realistic prospect of being realized in the time and energy you have. But it's not the worst thing in the world if say you're going to do X and you manage 70% of whatever X was, if that makes sense. So you're recalibrating down from what you thought you'd be able to do, but you shouldn't be completely changing the abstract. It should be vaguely in the same area as you said it was going to be on. Does that make sense? So a lot of the time, people will submit abstracts while they are in the process of doing fieldwork. And if you are doing fieldwork right, you should discover things during fieldwork that you have to recalibrate and rethink through. because fieldwork is never straightforward. You should be going, oh shit, I thought I'd find X and I actually found Y. And as a consequence, the paper I'm now writing is Y and not X. Does that make sense? So put the abstract in anticipation that this is where you will land, but don't be massively anxious if it isn't exactly what happened in practice. The universe always has other plans. Online, can I ask whether there's any questions? I see a few people have joined us. Any further questions? Okay. I don't see anything online. Any other questions so far? Okay. So I'm going to walk you through some general considerations about writing and submitting an abstract. And then I'm going to give you some very targeted advice regarding how an abstract is going to look like. Okay. So the general advice on submitting an abstract is that there are conferences taking place all the time. There are conferences taking place in South Africa, here in Gauteng, in other provinces. So if you're aspiring to kind of pick up experience, you want to be on a bunch of different mailing lists. You want to kind of sign up and follow on Twitter, engage on LinkedIn to get a sense of what people in the field are doing. That makes sense? So there's political science associations, there's sociology associations, there's history associations, there's anthropology associations. Whatever your home discipline is, you should be on their mailing list. The political science South African one is really shit. They're kind of a bit sad and pathetic. But other people that have healthy professional associations, you should be signed up and in the know. But there's also conferences taking place in Europe. There's conferences taking place in the UK. And then in the US, there's the big kind of global professional bodies, the American Political Science Association, the American Sociology Association. These conferences have 5, 6, 7, 10,000 people. They're absolutely gigantic. It's ridiculously expensive to attend them because the Rand isn't worth anything. And they have very long lead times. So the one I most often go to is either the American Historical Association or the International Studies Association. You submit an abstract for consideration on their program 10 months before the actual conference. And it's an online system where they will not extend, they will not forgive. You submit by the deadline or you don't go. Local call for papers are very different. Local call for papers always extend the deadline. They always publish the deadline and then like about a week before they're like, you know what, have another 2 weeks. And if you want to submit to a South African conference and the thing is closed 3 weeks after, you should still email the organizers and go, I know it's closed, but would you please consider? If that makes sense. So don't see deadlines and think that they're real deadlines. They are not necessarily real deadlines. It is not unusual for people to be added on conference programs 3 weeks before the actual conference, a month before the actual conference. So if you see something that is on topic, you should never feel uncomfortable in simply just kind of kicking the tires and seeing what the organizers say in terms of submission. Another way you can think about submitting to a conference is you submit as part of a panel. So on HNet and even on Twitter these days, you'll see people go, I'm in the process of putting a panel together for this conference. If you're interested in submitting, you can then submit as part of a panel. Why would a panel be better than a paper? Any ideas? Panel's less work for the conference organizers. So a panel is less. A panel is less work because they don't have to find you a home on a panel of their own. They can just go, it's a panel, it's done. And as a consequence, because it's less work for them, they are far more likely to accept something that's already done for them rather than them having to do the work to find you a home. The other thing you can do is you can invite people in the field who you want to have conversations with to come on your panel. So you go, I'm interested in this person does this. You email them and you go, I'm putting together this panel. Would you potentially be interested in doing something for this panel? Now, if they're a senior scholar, they will almost certainly go, I'm sorry, I probably already committed a paper, but they can chair or discuss, and they will help to get your panel up, but also you're guaranteed that you get to talk to them because they show up and they chair your panel. So panels are ways of making connections and meeting people who work in similar areas. So it's probably more work than you want to contemplate right now. I just suggest submitting an individual paper, and then I put you in panels. That's what I'm going to do. That's part of the work I do for this project. But as you go along, do keep in mind that people who put panels together get to have conversations with the people on their panel, and that's a useful thing to do. So you can put a panel together. Irrespective of whether it's a paper or a panel, you have to respond. Can I get copies of the papers to what we call the call for papers? So can I actually need the other one. That one. Yeah. So I've given you two call for paper examples. One is the African Studies Association call for papers. This is the American one. It's in Chicago. It's closed. And I've given you the Anthropology Association conference, the one we're going to submit to. Now, you need to read quite carefully the call for papers. But can I just ask, do you think you have to submit a paper that is directly aligned with the terms of the call?
Yes.
Yes? You're just sitting there going, it's obvious. What are you, on drugs? The answer is actually no. For these conferences. Now, these are annual conferences. They're held every year or every 2 years, and they are basically professional association conferences. Now, if you had a call for papers that was very specific, do you think all the people in that professional association would be able to submit papers? So for the Anthropology Southern Africa conference, you can pay attention to the call, but they will not only ask whether you are aligned with the call when they consider your paper. I've been to professional association conferences where I couldn't tell you what the call was on. Didn't look, didn't care, didn't pay attention. And the reason I didn't look and didn't care and didn't pay attention was that the conference is big enough that they will organize all of the papers across the entire field into streams. So for a big political science conference, there'll be a migration stream, there'll be a political economy stream, there'll be a gender stream, there'll be a history of ideas stream, there'll be an election stream. And all of these streams operate separately from the call for papers stream. So sitting below the call for papers is a whole bunch of other people who are organizing and placing and putting on the program material which has absolutely nothing to do with the call for papers. Okay? So it might help your chances of being accepted if you hit the call for papers, but for a big professional association, it doesn't matter very much at all. The key consideration is this anthropology? Is this politics? Is this law and society? Is this philosophy? So the criteria for inclusion and exclusion at a professional association conference is, are you doing work in the discipline? It's not, are you lining up with the call for papers? Now, it gets a bit tricky. There's other times where the call for papers is hugely important. So there's conferences every year. They get held every year until the sun burns out. There are also ad hoc conferences where some individual academics are putting shit together. You'll see this, they'll go, such and such universities are organizing this event. If it's a one-off event, if it's not part of a regularly scheduled programming, you have to hit the call for papers. So you have to basically demonstrate that you have a paper which lines up with the terms of the call. So professional associations, you can ignore the call. Like, as long as it's anthropology, no one's going to give a shit. But if it's an ad hoc conference on a specific theme, you have to hit the call very precisely, because otherwise you'll be rejected for lack of fit. Now, how do we navigate this? Have a look at both of the calls that I've sent you, and I apologize for those of you who are online. I'll try and make this as a generic descriptor as well as a specific one. Looking at a call for papers, you need a highlighter. You need a highlighter where you go, what are the key words and phrases and concerns which animate this project? So, key sorting questions. Where is this geographically located? What part of the world do they give a shit about? What are the questions they are trying to ask? What kinds of issues are they seeking to bring together for a conversation or discussion? So if you're hitting an ad hoc one-off conference, you're looking for the keywords. You're looking for the questions and orientations. And when you go to write your abstract, you should speak back to the organizers the keywords and concerns and questions they want answered. That makes sense? So at this point, on an ad hoc call for papers, where it's not a regular scheduled professional association, you will significantly increase your chances if you align your project with the language and framing in the call for papers. Does that make sense? So professional associations, we don't really give a shit. Ad hoc one-on-one conference, one-time conferences, this stuff is hugely important and consequential.
Please repeat, align the project with the?
With the keywords and questions and issues that the project kind of wants. So to give you an example, I was part of a workshop earlier this year where we asked for submissions on state surveillance in Southern Africa. And as part of the call for state surveillance in Southern Africa, we asked for contributions that would bring new empirical research together. And when they say they want empirical research, what they're saying is, please don't send us a lit review. Because a lit review is not going to add anything. You need to have evidence that contributes to this conversation. Okay, anyone online want to come in here? So when it comes to following the call, sometimes it matters, sometimes it doesn't. When it comes to the deadlines, if it's a local one-off conference or a South African Oppressional Association, you can miss by a couple of weeks and no one's going to give a shit. If it's a European or US North American conference, you're 5 minutes late, they will not consider. So you need to know which of these two that you're applying to. Let's get to what, yeah. Yeah, no worries.
You said it's either you do the work related, or you already have the work related to that field in the politics of sociology or whatever. Or if you do not, then whatever the call for papers is calling for, then you do that.
Yeah.
So then for this conference now that we're doing.
For this conference, I want you to not pay that much attention to the call unless it's a good fit. Okay? So the reparation, like, you know, I work on reparations. Like, so if I have a repairing historical wrongs project, I'm like, excellent, the call is there, and then I will work off the call. But if you're a long way away from the call, thematically and conceptually, you just ignore the call. And you submit thinking, I want to make this interesting to an anthropologist, but not, I want to make this to interesting to an anthropologist who cares about the call. If that makes sense? So you have to pay attention to the disciplinary orientation of the conference. You do not have to pay attention to the specific languages of the call.
So if you're manipulated to be interesting enough for that anthropologist, or?
I will get to that. Okay. We're going to talk to abstracts. Can I just ask online? I'm going to keep checking in, but online people have so far been very quiet, which makes me a little anxious. Are there any questions I'm missing?
Actually, I think everything's been quite clear so far.
Okay, thank you. Reassurance is useful. I'm a little worried I'm kind of speaking into the void because there's currently 12 people online. Okay, so what goes into an abstract? An abstract is, in a lot of cases, submitted through an online portal, which hard caps your word count. So this happens with funding applications a lot. Like whenever I apply for money, they give me 10,000 characters. And if I have 10,001 characters, it won't let me hit kind of submit. Has that ever happened to anyone? Most of the time, they give you quite precise expectations for what an abstract looks like. In this case, I've kind of unilaterally given you a medium ask, which is consistent with professional norms. And that is your abstract should be between 200 and 250 words. It should not be more than 300. Unless they asked for an extended abstract. And they'll often call it an extended abstract. Historians love his extended abstracts. Like I went to Prague last year and they wanted 600 words. But they tell you they want 600 words, right? Unless they say extended abstract, it is 200 to 250 words. You should not be going over 250 words. A good abstract can be 180. Abstract should not be 300, 350, 400 words. You're not helping yourself by making it longer. You're creating a wall of text that no one wants to read. Okay? Because an abstract ideally should be one paragraph. It should not be half a paragraph, line break, another paragraph. Your abstract should be one continuous paragraph as something that stands alone that is 250 words. No more than 250 words. In addition to that, you want to submit a professional bio that is roughly 100 words. Now, your professional bio should do 3 things. It should say who you are, it should say what you're interested in, and it should include your major professional accomplishments or things you're working on. So it's literally name is a master's student in political studies at the University of the Witwatersrand. Full stop. She is interested in keywords. Dissertation is on. Right? So most professional bios are literally this follow. This is who I am. This is what I'm interested in. This is the stuff I'm working on. And for those of you who are just starting out, it's entirely possible to have a bio that's 60, 70, 80 words. It should not be more than 100. Even if you're the most distinguished what in the world, who's won like 5 Nobel Prizes, it doesn't need to be long. If you've won 5 Nobel Prizes, I'm not sure you even need a bio. You just show up and go, hey, you know what I mean? Like everyone knows who you are at that point. So you want to just distill your professional kind of accomplishments down into a small number of points. Now, this is going to be tricky for those of you who are online, but for those of you who are in person, I've given you a series of abstracts. Now, these abstracts come from 2 projects I edited. The first was a special issue looking at slavery and marriage in Africa. And you can see on the first 2 pages through to the beginning of page 4, they are the abstracts for the slavery and marriage special issue. The second one is an entirely different project that looked at the politics of numbers and quantification in world politics, which has a series of additional abstracts. Now, for those of you who are online, and if you've arrived late, please put your email in the chat, and I will send through these examples. Now, for those of you who are in person, I just want to pull you to page 1. What stands out on the abstracts on page 1?
It starts with this paper.
Yeah. You flip through, look how many of them start with this paper. It's about half. This paper is a perfectly reasonable start to an abstract. This paper examines transformations in the nexus between slavery and marriage and coercion in northern Uganda. This paper focuses on this geographic region and gives a shit about these concepts. Right? So the first part of an abstract should be extremely clear this is where we are. These are the concepts we give a shit about. And these are the concerns that animate this paper. So it should be clear within the first 2 or 3 sentences of your abstract what your keywords are, what part of the world you're working on. So you should never be so theory heavy that someone reading your abstract goes like, what the fuck is it on? Like, you should know what your cases are. You should know what the things you care about look like. And you should not leave anyone reading your abstract in suspense regarding any of this. You need to be very clear. This is my time period. This is my location. These are my concepts. And this is what I'm focusing upon. Now, second one, this paper is concerned with colonial and missionary representations of gender-based violence in the colonial Congo during the early 20th century. It's on Congo, it's on colonialism, it's on missionaries and gender-based violence, and we have the time period defined. So your abstract should be providing empirical information regarding what it is you're working on in the first 2 or 3 sentences of the process. The second bit your abstract should be including, it should be clear what your sources of information are. If you've done interviews, say you've done interviews. If you've used archives, say you've used archives. If you've done participant observation, say you've done participant observation. You should make clear in your abstract what the evidence base of the paper looks like. Now, in anthropology, this is hugely important. So they are going to want to know what your fieldwork was and how it looked like. Make sense? And then finally, you should be signaling what argument or contribution the paper wants to make. This doesn't require you to say the paper argues that. It can instead, so I'll look at this. This is the second abstract. Have a look at the second abstract towards the bottom. So on the top of page 2, second abstract on the Belgian Congo. I'm going to read the last 2 lines for those of you online. Archival sources reveal that similar forms of everyday violence were classified in very different ways and aroused very different levels of concern. So it's archives. This sentence is an argument. Violence is classified differently, depends on who does it and who's it's perpetrated against. And then it says this lasting division in turn has ramifications for ongoing debates around legal feminist and developmental discourses over forced marriage, consent, and gender violence. So you can make an argument in an abstract that doesn't use the word argument. It can be clear from how you set up the frame of reference. Does that make sense? So I'll give you another example, because the first project on marriage was a history project. The second project on numbers was a political science project. So if you look at the one I wrote, which is at the beginning, at the bottom of page 5, benchmarking the globe, the quantification of norms in world politics. Halfway down the abstract, we make clear what our conceptual framework is. In this introductory article, we identify and analyze 4 key features of benchmarking as a distinct mode of governance in world politics. These are 1, 2, 3, 4. So the first part of your abstract establishes what it's on, where the time period is, what the location is, what the keywords are. The middle section deal with your evidence and analysis. It might be here where you bring in key authors and arguments. The final section outlines what your contribution and argument looks like or might look like. If you are unclear exactly what your argument looks like at this stage, you can flip the final section and speak in terms of questions that the paper wants to answer. Does that make sense? So your final third of the abstract should either make clear what the argument of you want to develop is. A conference paper, a journal article is never a murder mystery. We don't wait till the end to find out who did it. We make clear what the key contributions are at the beginning. If you're not quite clear what the contributions are, you talk about the questions you want to answer in the paper. Does that make sense? So it's a sequence. The first bit is, these are the concepts, this is the time period, this is the location. Second bit, this is the issues I'm grappling with, these are my sources of evidence. Final part of the abstract, this is the argument or questions that I want to answer. Now, it is not a contract. You can change it, you will change it. Whatever the hell you think you're doing will not be what you do when you get to the conference. Okay? I can promise you that. But what you want to do is set out a manageable plan which makes clear in your own mind what kind of paper you want to write if the abstract is accepted. So it is important in setting the stage and defining what the purpose of the project looks like, if that makes sense. Now, crucially and finally, I have one additional bit of advice for you. Do not have a title that is 4 lines long. Do not have a title that is 3 lines long. Do not have a title that is 2 full lines long. No one wants a title that goes, here's 25 keywords, heritage, identity, symbolism, memory, reparations, big, long, dense concept, comma, dense, comma, concept, comma, dense concept, comma. That is never what you want to do. Your title should be factual and to the point. What country or city or location are you working on? What is your time period? What are the key concepts you give a shit about? Okay, and you should be able to do that in 1 line. And if you go over to the second line, it should have more blank space on the right-hand side than text on the left-hand side. Okay, titles are short. They should not be mystery keywords when no one works out what the hell it is. Okay, now I've given you these abstracts. I want you to have a look at them. I just want to briefly direct you to the professional bios in the abstracts, because I not only gave you abstracts, I also gave you examples of professional bios. For those of you who are online, again, I'll send them out. These are bios of people that are a little bit further along than you are, so you shouldn't be overly worried that they say more than you say, but they still give you a sense. This is my name. This is what I think is. This is what I care about. These are my principal contributions and arguments. Professional bios are very standardized. They all look kind of the same. Okay. Did anyone find in these abstracts a title that went on to 3 lines? no one should have a title on 3 lines. If you have a look at the title, they're either on 1 line or just over 1 line. People overload titles. People overload abstracts. People try and go, here's everything I've ever thought, here's all the keywords. And it just swallows, it swamps. So when you write an abstract, focus on something that is core, focus on something that feels manageable, focus on something which is not everything you've ever thought about a topic, but instead seeks to carve off and focus and prioritize part of the larger whole of shit that you care about. Make sense? Okay. So where to next? You need to submit to the everythingeverywhere@wits@gmail.com email address a 200 to 250 word abstract with a title. You'd think I wouldn't need to say that, but some people submit abstracts without titles. Not helpful. Please submit a title. And an 80 to 100 word professional bio where you are registered, what you study on, what you are working on for your dissertation. You submit that by the 26th of August, and you do not submit to the ASA website. And that is because we are past the deadline for submission to the ASA dead site. And I followed my own advice and talked to the organizers, and we got permission to submit late. So I have a commitment from the organizers that they will consider these abstracts. I will put you in panels. We're not going to submit you as individual papers. I will thematically organize you in ways that I anticipate will ensure that a few more of you get up. It doesn't mean I'm going to put you in panels that perfectly align. Sometimes you have to force feed panels where you're like, oh, it's just a random panel with some weird shit. And if that's you, I promise you it's not personal. Sometimes papers fit together nicely, sometimes they don't, and I can't fix that. Make sense? Okay, so that is the advice. I would really like you all to submit. If you submit, you know what happens next. If you have questions about how to proceed, I'm happy to answer them. But even if you don't go further than this, I really hope that this gives you a better sense of how to put it together and what the steps and processes look like. Because you guys are all accomplished at writing essays and dissertations at this stage. Doing this, a paper, an article, means building up muscle memory for new skills. And you kind of know you already know how to do one thing. What we're trying to do is give you some applied example and guidance so you can do this other thing. And we hope that that proves to be useful, irrespective of how far you go on the next part of the journey. Okay, anything else? Or are we good? Online people, are we good? You should have my email if you're stuck or need guidance. Just send me further emails. No. I mean, I think it'd be nice if you probably told your supervisors, but you guys are adults, right? You need to make the decision about what to do with your life. I need to be clear here that this is more work than simply your dissertations. If you sign up to this, you are adding another thing you have to do on top of all the things you are already doing. Now, we've designed it so you can use the shit you're already doing to provide a foundation for this. But because the expectations and protocols are different, if you submit an abstract and you're asked for a paper, you're being asked for more work. And you need to decide as adults whether that additional work you're doing is worthwhile given the other things you have to do. Some people may go, I really need to prioritize my dissertation, and on a considered mature reflection, I can't take this on right now. That is a sensible choice for some people. Don't kid yourself into thinking that you can miraculously do this without it taking away from something else you're doing, because it will. I'm not promising it's magic, but what I am promising is that this could be professionally rewarding and you can build up those muscles you don't yet have in this other area. Make sense? Okay, online people, I'm hoping that's enough. I've already said, talk to me. Beyond that, thank you for attending. I hope it's useful. I will send through the examples of the documentation when I get a free moment. If not, follow up. Okay, thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Did that help, or are you feeling now even more involved?
I think what avoid intimidating for us is like everybody's PhD, not we like little kids and they're like, okay, when do we